This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with football coach and author George Koto Rice. He discusses his journey into football coaching, his time at European giants Porto and Barcelona, as well as his book and the research behind it into tactical periodization. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, please make sure you share it with friends and family. I hope you enjoy. Right, so George, really appreciate you spending a bit of your time with us this morning. I know we caught up a little bit off air, but how are things your end? Are you all okay?
Yeah, Michael, thank you. Thank you for your invitation. For me, it's a pleasure to be here talking with you, and I hope to make it valuable for everyone hearing us here. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. So for people that maybe haven't come across you or your work, do you want to give us a summary of, and I know we said off air that this was going to be difficult because of the length of it, but a short-ish summary of you, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah, definitely. I said it could be a bit difficult for me to summarize it, as I'm really glad of the journey I've had until now, and I feel and I look back at it as a rich one in the sense that I started coaching while I was in the university in Porto, student of Professor Vitor Frade, one of um, the biggest and brightest brains about the football methodology, created a training approach called tactical periodization. And as a student in this university, we had to do our practicals in a club, and the professor invited to join the FC Porto football school. And there I found a hub of greatest uh, young coaches trying to really apply the ideas that we get in university with this professor. And some of them are now in top clubs, and also in this process, I felt that I was fortunate because of the approach that we had since the beginning as a coaches. It was with someone that look at the training in a very different way from the classic approach, where things are uh, quite more linear, quite more um, oriented to a classic approach to training, based in athletics, based in didactic procedures that are quite distant from what learning should be, from what ecological approach should be of the human development. And yeah, some coaches like Pep Linders, that was at that time in FC Porto, now he's in Liverpool, also with Vitor Matos, like Georges Maciel is now in Lille in France. Um, yeah, and the other coaches in some other contexts. Uh, it was very helpful for me to put in practice um, this idea that we got firstly in university, and then with Professor Vitor Frade also at that time working as a methodologist in FC Porto every day with us. It was very interesting dynamic to discuss between us and with him in a daily basis. And then after 3 years in this environment, I moved to Barcelona. I wanted to know other ways, other approaches to training. It was also that time where FC Barcelona with Pep Guardiola was quite attractive for everyone involved in football and in training. And yeah, I moved there uh, firstly to get in touch with the La Masia, with the coaches, with the process of training there, and try to get as close as possible to also the first team dynamics, and at the same time complete my academical um, masters with masters in higher performance, and at the same time to be an interesting possibility for me to do the UEFA licenses in Spain, as they are working in a more dynamic and faster way to get the full licenses than in other countries. And in that moment in Portugal, it was even suspended, all the courses. So this move to Barcelona was also something that I look back and I think it was a very good decision from my side. And later on, after finishing the master and publishing the final thesis as a book, I also could get into the Barça Academy system, where I was coaching in Barcelona about 4 years before moving to Nigeria through seasons as a technical director of the Barça Academy in Lagos. And then during that process, it was very interesting for me to sometimes have the possibility to observe the first team training sessions, to contact with other clubs in Catalonia, where the coaches development and the coaches education system is quite rich and competitive and producing a good level of players and coaches. Of course, development happens at the same time. And in terms of training methodology, for me, it was also a great opportunity to meet Paco Cerulo, who worked with Johan Cruyff, with Pep Guardiola, and nowadays, or in the recent years, developed even deeper his approach to what is the game and what is the game idea that differentiates FC Barcelona from the others. And I really appreciate the openness from these people with these rich experiences to share with a young Portuguese moving
I
to
think
Catalonia at the time.
we'll come on to that because I think that's a really obviously nice segue and stuff. But I think if we start off with, obviously you mentioned going into Porto, etc., and Porto has a real rich history of producing players. Obviously, most listeners will be aware of them during that season with Jose Mourinho, where they went on to do really well in the Champions League, etc. From you as a young coach or practitioner going into Porto, and I guess at that time you're quite malleable in terms of ideas that you'll pick up, etc. What was your first thoughts of the academy? How did it feel? Was there any particular methodology or culture that you felt Porto really tried to go after and have within their academy?
Yeah, absolutely. At that time, more or less, the 40 coaches involved in the youth and football school of the club, almost 100% were students of Professor Victor Frat. So they were quite aligned in terms of philosophy, in terms of ideas about what training should be, about what the role of the coach should be in this youth development process. And even in the club, there was a project at that time called 611 that comprehends the time between 2006 and 2011, and had the goal to bring young players to the first team during those years, and that happened quite successfully, as you remarked, and that's a fact. Also with incorporation of some external element to this methodology, like for example the role of Pep Linders that came from PSV at that moment, quite oriented more for a curve approach, curve method of technical development, but also it was interesting for us to see his evolution in terms of his starting point, quite more analytical in this sense, and getting uh, aligned and open to receive from a more ecological approach from the point of view uh, of the game being the main ingredient of this development, and not only the relationship player and the ball, but with the game involved, with this variability and these unpredictable scenarios uh, being our main tool to to promote the development of the player. So yeah.
And in terms of structure of training for the Porto Academy, what what did it look like? So was it, very game based, or was it very structured with technological drills, etc.? What did I guess the pathway look like from the younger age groups through to when hopefully they get through to the first team?
Mhm. No, in FC Porto at that time, as I said, nowadays it may be different because also Vitor Frade is not working with the club anymore. But at that time, with this approach, as you said, it was quite uh, 100% of the training game oriented. I mean, always um, with the focus on creating scenarios for the players with this ingredient that I was mentioning, like the variability, like the unpredictability, like the wholeness of the game, to really promote intelligent players and to attune the players to the dynamics of the nature of the game, and not and not. Um, Not oriented with this other approach that we may recognize in other clubs, in other philosophies about training, with analytical training, with more time spent in analytical or physical um, activities. No, it was with competition, if possible, all the games in training with this emotional um, uh, implication as it happens in the normal games, always with someone winning, someone losing, someone trying to be better than other, competing all the time, and of course also with this self competitiveness to to promote each player the desire to optimize the way it performs in these they perform in these environments and these situations that we create, um,
That's
with individual challenges for each one, but always in this game structure.
So that's really interesting because in England, particularly at the moment, at the grassroots level, they've tried to remove the competition element. So you turn up, it's a friendly, even the academies, there's no league table, there's no
Mhm.
um no competitions until maybe once or twice a year, but for the rest of the time it's just a friendly that you go and play to try and learn. How did your time at Porto help you understand the value of competition, and how
Mhm.
maybe if you do it the right way as a coach, it can help people strive and want to improve whilst also competing?
Mhm. It is a very interesting question. I always try also to pay attention to the way other countries, other nations, other clubs were approaching the training and the whole youth development. And yeah, this is a significant difference that, for example, happens in your region. And I believe, yeah, it is always related with the way we approach it and with the way uh, everyone around the players behaves according to this competition. So, if we are talking uh, about the well-being and about the pressure that the people around the players sometimes um, uh, creates, and sometimes in a certain way uh, exaggerate in the demands from the players about the focus in the external competition and in the scores and in the position in the table. Of course, if the focus is on those elements, is not the best way to take the positives of the competition. So we look at the competition as a way to get the full involvement of the human being in the situation. Of course, it can happen, and it is also a positive element to get this full involvement without the competition. But knowing the nature of the human being and and the way that also as a species we arrived to the point where we are, both these elements of cooperation and competition were always present in our evolution, and then knowing the benefits that it had, we try to get the best of it by having it present mostly we can, but yeah, trying to give a direction to this focus and to promote the education also of the parents and the coaches in the right way to don't to decrease, at least decrease the negative that can also have this competitive environment that we create. But in the end, as I was expressing, the facts and the practical experience and the sensation that I get from it is that if all the system around understands the whys, then everything gets more fluid and is a very rich and interesting approach and scenario and environment for the development of the player. For example, in Barcelona, we tried to be more to have more criteria in the moments we put competition, the moments we didn't, because we also wanted this natural competitive attitude from the player to exist independent of the point system of the game or the competition of the match, to be something that comes from inside and not from outside of this external attraction of the competition. So yeah, as mostly everything, I believe is a point of balance between both. Yeah, being true that in FC Porto, everything was highly competitive in this sense.
In your opinion, which one did you think helped players longer term? So if you were an academy director or academy manager, which one would you ask your staff to deliver? Would it be the competitive majority of the time, or would it be we're going to be skillful with when we're going to give them competition and when we're going to make it less pressurized from us and more internal motivated?
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe is a bit like in the educational system, where if you remove all the evaluations and all the marks and the examinations and the rewards, we are in a certain way developing students in an environment quite different from what the open world is, where you are constantly being demanded, constantly being evaluated, constantly needing to show your value, and then yeah, I know, and we knew that the kids are not small adults, are in the process of development, of discovery of the world, of exploration. But we are we are we are looking to promote a certain adaptability to what they will be demanded once they are exposed to the more professional environment. So I think that's a more in vivo approach if we create this nature, this comfort from their side to be used to deal with these dynamics of competition, the dynamics of having to overcome scenarios where they are not in a, in an advantage position. So even the management of these advantageous positions or related with the game or with the score, sometimes with more emphasis in one or in the others. But yeah, the nature of the game in the end is about this. Is you are playing with someone, and even this approach of playing with and not against, I think is and a detail, but is something that influences some of this environment that they create around. So looking at this competition as an opportunity to overcome yourself, to overcome the constraints and the problems and the situations that the opponents are creating to you. Yeah, definitely answering your question. The competition will be highly present, yeah, but with some space also to some more relaxed situations and more natural competition, even without the system points or the table or whatever.
No, it's an interesting point you make because competition is part of life, and they'll go school results, or they'll be being assessed at school, which is going to be part of it. When you're at work, you get assessed, be that if you're a footballer or you're not. So actually, trying to prepare them in sport for what the real world looks like, that competition element is always going to be present. In terms of when you then leave Porto and go to Barcelona, was there anything other than the competition element that really stood out to you as a difference between the two clubs? Was there anything in particular where you were like, wow, they do this very differently at Barcelona compared to Porto?
Um, well, it's interesting question. I think in those first impacts that I had once I arrived, firstly from outside and then gradually getting into a more internal perspective, um, I felt that both in Porto and Barcelona were having a complex approach or ecological approach in the sense of having the training highly game oriented, um, with yeah, as I was describing, with mostly the whole dynamic of the session with the team playing against other team, and then in the end of the session a match to get this relation between the initial situations and the real match. Um, I felt that in those moments, FC Barcelona was starting to create um, and to have a clear methodology about this game idea that was always present, but about the training process. Uh, they were starting to implementing it in a more systematic way, and in these initial years when I arrived there around 2013, um, gradually they were becoming closer and closer to what we were doing in Porto, and it was interesting for me because I came here to learn your way, and you are going into what I knew from before. Um, but then in the next years they had a quite dynamic and faster evolution, and in some ways um, they starting also to bring something new for me in terms of the approach, in terms of this constraints-led approach, in terms of uh, also the didactic procedure that you can create and you can use in training to attend different purposes. So yeah, it was. If you ask me the main differences at that time, I'm not sure if I can be clear with the answer right now, but the journey was this way that I described it.
No, that makes complete sense. And one thing that we perceive Barcelona to be is quite a, and this is from UK speaking, um, they seem to have a structure that goes all the way through the club. And you can say if you took the kits off of them and put them in a random kit, you would go, that's a Barcelona team because they play this way. One, is that correct? So is it very structured in terms of what you saw with their teams along the way? And two, how did they integrate that style if they did? So how did they teach it to U9s, the really little ones, all the way up to the U18s? Could you see the step-by-step process of their training and game methodology?
Um, Interesting, yeah, yeah, that is the the uh, biggest remark or the biggest definition of what FC Barcelona game idea is, that you can definitely remove their t-shirts and you identify and still recognize what team they are, and that's something that is highly known and recognized, that come from years and years uh, of having the same intention in terms of the way of playing, but as we talk, uh, mostly since this Johan Cruyff time in the club, knowing that it was something that already existed before, but uh, as I was trying to explain, in terms of systematization of the process, it was highly uh, um, abstract, and mostly in the recent years, also when these uh, these specialists in methodology and in training, and with this also this amazing background with these coaches, Paco Cerullo moved into the department of methodology of the club. It was when definitely these ideas about how to train, uh, how to create a process of training to promote this idea with the currents in all the in all age groups, in all the sessions, to promote these currents from the didactic point of view. It is not something that exists since a long time ago, but mostly in the last decade. Um, and I have to say that also uh, some of the coaches in the club that have a bigger impact in me about training. It came mostly from their intuitive um, approach to train. Even coaches coming from contexts in terms of their education. outside of football, from other areas of knowledge. Their intuition about knowing the player, about knowing about the game, of course. It was something very, very interesting for me to learn from and to realize how important it is in terms of the management of uh, special talents that the club has since a very early age. The recruitment process plays a big role in a club like that and like this, and then with this uh, orientation to a clear game idea, um, you know, the players arrive there coming from other contexts, and as I said, in Catalonia, uh, if you compare between UK and Spain, it's mostly you can compare Spain but especially in Catalonia, this philosophy of the path, this philosophy of the rondo, uh, plays a big impact in all the clubs since a very early age. And in these early ages, the recruitment is mostly about Catalonia, with of course some exceptions. But yeah, the players uh, have their experiences about football since a very early age, very aligned with this intention about passing the ball, about the collective way of playing. While maybe if we go to other countries, the the social constraints about football maybe orientate the players to other tendencies, um, to other ways of solving the situations of the game. So to try to answer the question, yes, this process and this approach to different age groups and this evolution to the complexity of the game, it exists nowadays, um, um, or at least till the moment that I was more present in the club about 2 to 3 years ago. Um, um, but also yeah the social and the environment constraints around the club also uh, make the job, let's say, of the coach quite easy in this sense because the players are talented and everybody knows what kind of style we are trying to develop and to promote. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that clarity of vision is an interesting one because, as you said there, everyone knows what the first team's looking for. So actually, when you go in, you'll naturally play that way. I know from speaking to Athletic Bilbao that within their training methodology, they have set sessions that you have to do at every age group that are given to you by the academy director or whoever and say you have to deliver these. Was Barcelona the same as that? Did they have set sessions that the coaches had to deliver? Or was it more based around principles and then the coaches could coach the principles however they wanted?
Mhm. Well, um, I was directly involved with the Barca Academy, and the Barca Academy is not exactly the youth teams of FC Barcelona. Barca Academy is the commercial school, and for example, in Barca Academy, we had the second approach. We had the principles, we had the ideas, and then the coaches have the role to design the sessions and to think about what is adjusted to the team and to the players we are coaching. But for example, when I moved as technical director to Nigeria with Barca Academy, I had to design the sessions for all the teams and to explain them to the coaches, and then the coaches were responsible for running the sessions in the off teams of FC Barcelona. Um, the first approach was more present. We in the club uh, there were uh, methodological coordinators for different age groups, and they were guiding and educating the coaches um, in terms of the training process, in terms of what can make more sense or not. But the final role of the designing of the sessions was responsibility of the coach, and I think it is very important to keep that power in the coach in terms of not only being him the one that is more close to the players and in the end is the coach and is the one feeling what they are the way they are evolving, what they may need, and in the end it was also my approach in this role of technical director in Nigeria, gradually to give more this power to the coaches and to be able also to receive from them, to listen them, and to be sensitive to what is their role. If they are coaches, this is a very important part of their of the coach role, and if we remove it from the coach, I think we need to have empathy in this sense, and I would not feel comfortable if I cannot create sessions for my players, and it was also. But it is also naturally a process also of education the coach, and then what they will create will also be oriented to the whole intentionality of the club, of the academy, in this sense. And I didn't mention after Barcelona, I had also this role in Shandong Taishan in China, where I was methodologist and coordinator of the younger age groups, and the approach was definitely the same, empowering the coaches. So this way, the coaches will also or should also empower the players. This is a kind of articulation between the different positions in the academy that we try to have there as well.
Perfect. I think this provides us a really good point to transition across. So I know from the book that you released, etc., and our conversations that you have a real passion for game models, periodization, training, etc. So as a starting point, do you just want to tell us, in your opinion, what does good training periodization look like? Obviously, you've been in some academy director roles, you've been in some roles where you've managed programs. In your opinion, what does good practice look like in that area?
Mm-hmm. Well, from my point of view, and I think in my previous answers, I also mentioned the main point is that we should train with the game. It's not about to train with the ball, not about to training analytical situations with orientation to the technical dimension or to the physical dimension. It's about to try to have as much as possible the whole ingredients present, and that will be definitely more easy to achieve with the game, with the nature of it, with keeping it as natural as possible. Is not making it too complicated, keeping it complex, but not complicated in the sense of not creating too much rules, too much modifications in terms of what is the natural dynamic of the game itself. So these two ideas of keeping it natural and keeping it human are quite important in this whole discussion about game models and periodization. Even well, in terms of concepts, this idea of game model was or have been taken in a way that I highly disagree. That is the idea that the coach should know and should define the way the team should play, and then will be someone transmitting them what they have to do, and this is definitely quite negative, even more in the youth development. So we should mostly be someone as the coaches that are using their eyes to observe what are the natural tendencies of the players and generating some constraints to promote and optimize their range of possibilities, and not to format them. And this is also related with this idea of Barcelona approach. Even if we know the whole intention, the main idea, we should not go into the mistake of format everyone to be passing the ball every time. This is not what we are talking about. It's about having clear the main principles, but then having these as as a starting point for the creativity of the players, and and to be surprised for what they do, and not to be expecting every time them to pass the ball and to be all the same kind of players. So the game will be much more richer if they provide different solutions, if they do unexpected interactions, even from us as a coaches. And yeah, when you talk about periodization, it, as is another concept that people tends to look at it as the need to divide the season in different periods, and it's definitely not about that. It's about knowing that during a period of time, like a season, like depending of the region, the month of train that we have with a team, we have we'll have a process of evolution of both the collective and the individuals that we are working with, or that we are coaching. And this is a non-linear evolution, and yeah, that there's any kind of need to divide things and to do some things first than others. That there's any receipt about that. It's just about um, to manage the process in a coherent and in a sensitive way, where you manage also the complexity of the situations in different days according to the state of the players, in terms of if they are coming from a match, maybe they are not with the freshness to do certain things. And in the middle of the week, once they are more recovered, they can maybe have higher demands in terms of complexity, in terms of elements to deal with in training. And that is not a matter of dividing things and creating these artificial divisions and separations in the season.
I'll come on to the game model bit in a second because I think that's a really interesting point you made. It seems like from this conversation, you're a big believer in as a coach, understanding your group and where they are at that moment in time, and then acting accordingly. So rather than having a real structure of we have to do this at this point in time and there's no give, you go, actually, this group has had high stress for the last month. And I can see that at this moment, they need an opportunity to have a more relaxed atmosphere. So that's what I'm going to give them. Or actually, they seem fresh today and seem alert. So today, we're going to try and increase the complexity of our training or games. Would you say that's a fair characterization of your belief around that?
Absolutely, Michael. Thank you for the description. Is absolutely the sensitivity is the key uh, factor, or the key point that differentiates the good coaches from the others. It's someone that I is also an inspiration for me. Rui Faria, because he came from a similar background than me. In a recent interview in Training Ground Guru, uh, talking about technologies that are now present in training, also of course in professional level, but also it's time more also in youth. He was asked, or he was saying, "Hey, if you cannot perceive if the players uh, are on their limit or not by your eyes, then you are not a good coach. If you need a machine to tell you that, better you go for other activity. And this sensitivity that you it's not something that you're born with or not. It's something that you also, from your experience, you get these indirect indicators about uh, their their fluidity in training, their coordination, even their comments between them, their reactions, their physical expression. You need to be with sensibility to identify and perceive, and as you said, this will be the tools for you to manage the process in terms of complexity, demands, everything. But this human relation and this human connection that you need to create. That's also why the coach needs to be really involved in what is happening and not coming to training with a receipt about, oh, I have to do this and this and this. And this. And then if you are going with this approach in training, you will not be open to receive, to identify what's happening, and is that management in the here and now that definitely differentiates the good coaches from the great coaches. Um, and yeah, I think if something is also another side that I try to make for myself as my own development, to listen to some of the top coaches, and they are constantly touching on these points about how the players, what the players are expressing to you in the daily dynamics, and what they are telling you for their reactions, for their behaviors, for their attitudes. Um, and that is crucial. And even if we now is coming to my mind, Guardiola, for example, used to mention a lot how much is important uh, to know each one and to know how they react differently, and to know to how to touch in each one. And this human uh, connection and these human relationships and attributes from you as a coaches are very, very important to develop, and normally in the coaches education process are not taken in consideration, or not with the emphasis it should be.
I guess because it's hard to teach, right? Teach someone to listen, observe the human element. Less, it's easier for a coach developer to say, well, here's the technical, tactical piece. You can go away and work on that. Where for you to be able to pick up on a interaction and say that's unusual for that player, it's a skill that takes time to grow and learn as a coach. You mentioned earlier around the game model piece, which really interested me around having some base philosophies, if you like, but allowing creativity within that, which I thought, um, from my perception, was interesting because you look at Barcelona as an entity, they have their way of trying to do things in terms of you perceive it as pass, 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 pass. But they also have a Ronaldinho or a Messi who has that ability to think of a different action to get them out, or even Iniesta, who, during his time of Pep Guardiola would come up with a different way of doing it. So in terms of trying to create a game model, how loose do you leave your game model regarding the principles? So rather than having maybe when the ball goes wide, one of our eights always runs into the half space, do you just look for loose principles of saying, can we get forward runs when the ball goes wide? Is it more in that for you?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it is. There are different points in the question, and talking about creativity for the audience, there is a very interesting article from Carlota Torrent, who is professor in Catalonia University, called "The Paradox of Creativity," where uh, she explains so well how much creativity needs boundaries, and in this sense, boundaries are what are the principles, are the tractors. So they will be the basis, they will be the guidelines for this creativity. So it's not uh, as Professor Victor Fraud also used to say, you are free to act without acting freely. So you have main principles orienting this creativity, because, and this is interesting because we have a student in our master in typography who came also from the actor world, the representing world, and he expresses it very well. Also, someone asked him to create without any reference, and and this was the most um, difficult challenge for him to develop, because when you don't have any reference it's like when you, and Antonio Damasio, neuroscientist, also gives some examples concerning this, that if you go to a shop and you want to shop some kind of product, and you have there a big amount of offer, if you don't have any factor that attracts you for one or other, being emotional factor, or being that you like more some colors or others, you will be spending that time and time. So you need some boundaries to make the creativity more uh, uh, easy to emerge, to catalyze from these different factors constraining uh, your your emergent behaviors in the here and now. Um, and concerning this problematic of the way we playing, and the definition of game model, I look at it. The game model is what the team is expressing, not something that we predefine and that we want the team to perform. In this sense, the way the players are oriented is uh, uh, in in a highest percentage would be oriented by principles, and not and if it's by principles, not that you have to go here, or the other player has to go there. It's about someone um, has to explore certain spaces, but even me from outside as a coach, I do not know who will be doing it, but I know that they will take the spaces in consideration, the exploration in spaces, even if they are in depth, or if they are more in the external spaces. They have this intentionality guiding their emergent expressions in the here and now, but it doesn't mean that every time someone will be there, that every time they will do it perfectly. But in the process of training, uh, we try, and here is where the model comes. We try to generate a modelization where the modelization is this process of generating habits, generating patterns where they get more comfortable to live with and to express what they are. Um, but um, but even considering that would be my ideal approach, we have to be also, and this would be mainly uh, uh, close to 100% present in the off level. But if we are talking about professionals, even knowing these and and trying to get the dynamic of the process close to this. Sometimes in the professional level we have other emergencies, so we need to close more things. Sometimes we need to tend more for the behaviors and less for the principles to make sure some things happen faster, something happen for sure. But this is about the orientation for the score and even for the protection of your position as a coach. But yeah, in the off level, uh, it should be more and more oriented by principles and in a more open way. Yeah.
I think the piece you said around the creativity is really interesting because actually to be creative, you're essentially breaking what the norm would do. So, creativity is going against what the majority of people would do in that circumstance. And in order for that to be a guidance, there has to be like you mentioned, the constraint on the environment, so people know what would normally happen. So I think of Messi, for example, because he's a really useful example. A normal player, when they have three defenders around them, would pass the ball. They would probably look to move the ball and exploit an overload elsewhere. Whereas Messi, when he identifies he can be creative, thinks, I can find a solution to beat those three players. But it's in a I guess constrained environment. Whereas if you just said to Messi, do what you like,
Mm.
he may try and dribble past three players at right back, left back, centre back, right midfield, left midfield, and all of a sudden that creativity becomes uh, less because he's constantly trying to do that thing, which then is not creative. That's his norm. So I think it's a really interesting point you make around actually you need the constraint to a certain degree to allow them to then be creative in that scenario or that situation. I think that's
It's
a fascinating concept.
it is, and it is important at the same time. And recently, I was hearing a recent interview from Antonio Damasio, as I mentioned, this neuroscientist, that being Portuguese is in US and a big reference for us for different reasons. He talks a lot about the previous intentions, about somatic markers, and yeah, since I started studying about coaching, neuroscience was very present. And he was being interviewed, and then he said to the person who was interviewing, now you are being creative in the way you are placing this question, because we tend to define creativity in a way that is something that needs to be very differential, and not necessarily. And it's also important when you talk about football to don't relate creativity only with the player with the ball doing 1v2, 1v3, 1v1. It can be with three players around and do a pass that is very creative. And Sergio Busquets is a very creative midfielder, and he's not doing 1v3s quite usual. So um, it is even the example you mentioned. You can tell Messi do whatever you do, but you know who is Messi, and you know uh, how what is education about football, what background he has. So you can perfectly tell them that you'll not start dribbling since the back to everyone every time. So this is the subconscious education that the process need to have to make sure that then the emergent behaviors in the here and now are oriented to this intentionality. And this is a process. This is a process that requires time, requires emotional implication, and this emotional implication is highly achieved with this competition that we talked before. Because then they will be completely involved trying to make the best they can in every moment, and they will feel the consequences in their bodies directly from from the experience they are having, and this is very, very, very rich in terms of acquisition, in terms of learning, um, and in terms of this non-linear approach, in terms of training, in terms of learning that we try to orientate our approach, and even in this sense of references, uh, we look a lot to the French. Uh, some French references, because when Professor Victor Fraud started studying about the body, about conscience, uh, in France there was a biggest development in that time, and nowadays, for example, Olivier Houdet is one of the responsibles, together with Daniel Kahneman, economist, with this approach to our process of interaction with the world, based on the subconscious or in the conscious, or even our process of inhibition of our instincts, um, and this comprehension and this knowledge about how we interact, how we perceive the world, and uh, how we express ourselves in the demanding situation and with the pressure that we're talking about, is one other very important point that is definitely almost never present in the coach's education as well. Only the technical aspects and physical and tactical, and not about the human being and about uh, how we interact, how we perceive, how we what is conscience. And this is big questions and very important ones. And I believe that also some of the most successful coaches, some more in an intuitive way, and others with the real knowledge about, um, have big worries about this point.
Yeah, you have to get to know the person before the player is a common thing. You need to understand them as people and how they feel and pick that up before you can coach them. I'm conscious of time that we allotted for this. So the last question for me, which is something I ask everyone, if I were to ask the people you work with or the players you coach to describe you in 3 words, how do you hope they would describe you?
Um, Passionate, um, always trying to pass to them this passion for the game, to try to play the most they can outside the training, the street football, the passion for the ball, um, and in terms of coaches, they will they will probably define me as um, proactive, um, and curious, in the sense that, since early age, as I explained in the first answers, I tried to find um, new challenges for myself, new perspectives, to try to don't close myself into one idea or into an approach, um, and this idea also of vulnerability is something that I try to have very present, to try to keep developing this sensibility as we are talking, to learn from all the experiences you have, to try to relate everything with football, and something it is difficult to manage as a human being, as well, this implication that we have about football, and sometimes to create this distance, is difficult for us, but yeah, this would be some of the main definitions about myself.
Perfect. Listen, really appreciate your time and thank you for bearing with me when we were getting this in the schedule. I know it was a lot of back and forth via Twitter DMs. So yeah, thank you for bearing with me and my busy schedule. But hopefully we can meet face to face soon when you come over to the UK. And yeah, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. And yeah, I'm very happy for this hour where I tried to expose some of my ideas, but yeah, of course, I'm open for everyone to contact you and contact me through yourself. Feel free, everyone. It was a pleasure. Yeah.